Okay, I'm back. This video is going to be about, and particularly, the Black fathers in the Black home. Um, Before I get started, I would like to remind you to please hit the like button and leave a comment if you possibly could. I really appreciate it. For a few years, more than a few years, one of the biggest topics of discussion in the Black community has been the fact that we don't have the nuclear family and how Black people have suffered because they don't have the Black father in the home. And the suggestion is that things would have been so much different in the Black community if the fathers had been in the home. And I made videos in the past about that. If you ever want to go back and look at them, um, but I'm not going to go into that today, at least not in the same way, because that one was basically discussing welfare and the role that that played and why supposedly the family didn't stay together. But this has to do with the Black father in particular, because there's a lot of discussion out there, and I really want to get to the root of that, of what I think is more of what Black people really need to understand about that dynamic, that relationship dynamic of the Black father in the home. And just to start it off, I'm gonna make it a little personal. I had a Black father in the home. My father was raised me. We were all together. We were the typical nuclear family. Me, my mother and father, and my brothers. My mother and father was together for 55 years before he died, and he never left. I never seen him beat my mother. He didn't do drugs. To my knowledge, he never cheated. We didn't have any long lost brothers or sisters show up at the funeral. And he was about as straight as they come. He was superintendent of the Sunday school of the church where we went. He was a deacon, and he was a great provider. um, there's nothing I can say about him as far as him being a provider, because he was a great provider. My mother didn't have to work. That was during the time when that wasn't uncommon at all for the man to be the breadwinner, and the wife didn't have to work, and she could be a stay-at-home mom. That's what my mother was, until she decided we were grown enough and she could go back to school and pursue her education and start a career of her own. But my father did his job. He did what he was supposed to do as far as providing. As far as being a father to me, no. And that's where I differ with a lot. There's a lot of men that I've talked to over the years that didn't have a father in the home, and I can tell that they're really bitter about that. And I know that they feel like they missed something. They feel like their life would have been different. It would have been somehow better had their father been there. And I get that, but they're missing something simply because it wasn't there. They really don't know, like I know, and like a lot of other people know. Because just having a father in the home, you have to qualify that. It's just like having your mother. It's just like having a biological mother. All mothers aren't great just because they're mothers. There are mothers that are crackheads. There are mothers that allow their children to be abused by their boyfriends. There are mothers that uh, have even prostituted their daughters. There are mothers that have done all kind of things. Just because you're a mother doesn't mean you're mother of the year. It just means you're a mother. And, it just means that you were able to participate in the same biological function that every female mammal on the planet has participated in and have an offspring. There's nothing special about that. You're a good mother if you are a good mother, not just because you're a mother. And the same thing obviously goes for a father. You're a good father if you are a good father. You can father all the children you want, but if you're not a functional father, it doesn't make you a good father. And I know that it's possible for a father to be in the home, never leave, and still be absent as far as raising the children, because my father did absolutely nothing to raise me to be a man. I can honestly say that. I think I would know since I lived with him my whole life. Because until I left home. What I learned about being a man, I learned partially from my oldest brother and from, after I grew up being around other men. Because my father didn't teach me anything. Now, I'm going to try to qualify that by saying it wasn't quite that simple. It wasn't, in other words, I'm not trying to say that he purposely didn't try to raise me to be a man. My father, for most of the time, worked 2 jobs, and plus we had rental property. So when he wasn't working his second job, a lot of times he was at our rental property taking care of that, dealing with tenants. A lot of times they would, if he had to put somebody out, they would tear stuff up on the way out, as tenants tend to do. So it was a constant headache. He was always having to do something all the time at the other house. Plus, he had to take care of the house that we were living in. So we had 2 houses. 2 houses, and and not all the time, but a lot of times he had 2 jobs. And that's not easy. That's very time consuming. And so he did what he could. And when he was home, he wasn't sociable at all. And it wasn't until I grew up and became a man myself and became a family man that I understood why a lot of times he didn't engage with us any more than he did. Because if you work a stressful job, a lot of times when you get off from work, you don't feel like being bothered. You don't feel like talking. You don't feel like being bothered. You definitely don't want to be bothered with BS. And you don't want to engage in any petty squabbles, whatever. And that's what children tend to do. Brothers fight, whatever. So I get that. I totally get that. But I don't let him totally off the hook for that, because he did engage with my other brothers. He just didn't, for whatever his reason, he didn't do it with me. And I don't want to go any more personal with that, but just suffice to say, I know what it's like to be in the house with a father who's not functionally a father to you. Now, without a doubt, as far as would my life had been different had he been there, because that's always the thing that people want to look at the most, is what would my life have been like? How different would it have been had my father been there? That's what people who don't have the father in the home think. And yes, it would have been different, because at that particular time in history, women could not make the same amount of money as men. So even if my mother had a job and she was raising us by herself, she wouldn't have been able to make as much money as he did because they simply didn't pay women the way they paid men. Even when women did the same job, they still didn't pay them as much back then. And the employer's reason was it wasn't like they just had it in for women or they didn't respect women. Their thing was that the man was typically the breadwinner. And so most of the time, if a woman was working, she had a husband who had a job. So she was not the sole breadwinner. So he didn't see why he should have to pay her the same amount of money that he would pay a man who would be having the obligation of taking care of an entire family and being the sole breadwinner. So, ever wrong or right, whatever you want to think about it, that was their reasoning behind that, why they didn't want to pay women the same amount of money back then. And so, yeah, if my mother had worked, it's not likely she would have made the kind of money that he made. And not to mention the fact we wouldn't have had her in the house because she couldn't have been in two places at one time. So, yeah, my life would have been totally different. My mother wouldn't have been the same person. She wouldn't have been as attentive and able to do all the things that she was able to do as being a homemaker. If she was out there working, we would have had to do more or settle for a lot less in the terms of whatever she was doing for us. So, yes, my life would have definitely been different along those lines. But as far as building my character as a man, I can't say in my particular case that things would have been any different if my father hadn't been there because he didn't engage with me that way. He did not raise me to be a man. I can still remember one of the first jobs I got, and it may be one of the reasons why I love that business so much. Because, when something happens and it does something for you, you tend to be more loyal toward it. You tend to have better feelings about it. When I first started selling cars, they had a plaque back in the room that all our cubicles were at. And this plaque had a saying on it. And the saying was, when you're a man, you handle things. When you're not, you get handled. That struck me like a lightning bolt. Everybody else walked past that sign, probably didn't even pay attention to it. But it was like it was speaking to me because I had never had anyone really speak to me. Well, I had one other person. I'll get to that in a second. But that said so much because I'd never been talked to that way. And I didn't really understand that. I wasn't a snowflake, but I still thought that, there were things that was legitimately not my fault that mattered as far as how I came up and things that happened to me and I realized when I read that plaque, when it said, when you're a man, you handle things. When you're not, you get handled. It's basically saying that this is the reason why some men in life find their way as hard as it is because they don't understand that one simple thing, that the world, if you're a man, if you're a male in this world, no one cares about what happens to you because everybody's got a sob story. And a lot of people think, oh, you ought to hear my sob story. I heard yours, but wait till you hear mine. And some people think they can outdo you with their sob story. When you're a man, nobody cares. It might work for women and it works for children. It doesn't work for men. Because the only thing people care about when you're a man is how you handle what happened to you. That's the only thing they care about. You can tell them anything. You can roll up to them in a wheelchair and only be half a person. The bottom half of you is gone. And the only thing people are going to care about is how you're handling it as a man. Because if you're balled up in the fetal position somewhere with a bottle or a drug or whatever, you're going to be seen as a loser, and nobody really too much cares about you. They don't care about what happens to you at that point. No more than pity. If you want to be pitied, most men don't want to be pitied. So no one really cares. And for the first time, I understood that like I had never understood it before. Regardless of everything that I'd gone through up until that point, I had never really understood that before because no one ever really told me that. That the only thing people care about when you're a man is how you handle what happens to you, not what happens to you. And in the Black community, that's huge because we're real big on what happened. We love to talk about slavery. We love to talk about oppression. We love to talk discrimination. We love to talk about a lot of different things. And then we don't understand why no matter what we go through as men out here, we don't seem to ever get the credit we deserve. We don't ever seem to get a break. No matter what happens to us, nobody seems to care because they're all looking to see how we're going to handle it. All the other races of men are racist, period. Not just the men, the women are looking too, and the kids. They're looking to see how, as men, we handle what happens to us. That's huge. Because that makes all the difference in the world. And one of the reasons why a lot of athletes and people who have made it get the respect that they do from people of other races is because if they came up hard and if they didn't have a good life, and if they had rough times coming up, and they made it, and they persevered, then now they're looking to see, okay, you handled that situation. Yeah, you had it rough, but you handled it. That's when you get credit for being a man. Because when you don't handle it, you don't get credit for being a man. That's when you get handled, as they say. And then the handling part really resonated because I thought about how cops manhandle Black men all the time. How many videos haven't we seen where cops are manhandling a Black man? Because nobody respects us because we're not handling our business. They handle us like they don't handle any other race of people as men. That's huge. But I never learned that at home. I didn't. I didn't learn it from my father. I learned to be responsible. I learned to be a man of my word. Oh, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a foundation. I had a religious foundation and I had a moral foundation. So, I give him credit for him doing what he did, but as far as me having to face the world as a man out here in the world, no. He didn't prepare me for that. When I left home, I was totally unprepared. Totally. And I made more mistakes than I could even talk about. I couldn't make enough videos of some of the dumb mistakes I made. It was all out of ignorance because I didn't know any better. Like most young Black men, I simply didn't know any better. And of course, the worst thing that happened is you end up befriending other young Black men who don't know what it is to be a man either. And you end up doing dumb stuff together because they can't tell you what they don't know any more than you can tell them what you don't know. So that's mostly what you end up dealing with in that situation. And again, men who grew up without a man in the home that really thought that would make a big difference. Yes, it would. If you have a father who is engaged and knows how to raise a man, yes, it makes a difference. If you don't, no. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Uh, Years ago, when I was in my early 20s, um, I was with when I was with my first wife. We were over this couple's house, this white couple, and they had a little boy. I don't remember how old he was, but he seemed to be real intelligent for his age. He was real little, but he was real sharp. And so we were over there one day, and they were kind of going back and forth about something. And when the little boy left the room, the father turned to me and he said, sometimes you gotta let them learn how to win. And I sit there and I'm like, wow, let them win, let them learn how to win. That concept didn't even exist in my household when I was growing up. Are you kidding me? It was do as I say, or I'll kill you. It was do what I say, or you end up on the floor. This is my house. You do what I tell you to do. As long as you're up under my roof, you do what I tell you to do. There's no win. And that's and it dawned on me. That's the reason why you know how to win. It's got to start somewhere. And the average black male, they don't learn to win until they get into sports. You don't win at home. They win in sports. That's the reason why they cleave to sports the way they do. Because for most of them, that's the first time they could ever win at anything. Can you imagine winning at home? Winning the dispute with your parents? I mean, that's got to do a little something for you. That's got to be somewhat of a confidence builder. That's got to be a little teaching there. And so anyway, again, there are other things that happen along the way that also affect us. But the bottom line is, it's not as simple as just having a father in the home solves all problems. And so the other thing that I've noticed is, where is the proof that that's even a thing in the first place? If you check the bios of some of the most successful people, and I have, and it's easy to do, you'll find out that a lot of them did not have fathers in the home. Some of the biggest names that you know of: Jay-Z, P. Diddy, Rick Ross, to name a few. They were mostly raised by their mothers. And look where they ended up. And so, the myth of, and I call it a myth because I don't believe in it. To me, it's a myth that there's this conspiracy by the white power structure to take down the white family, to take the fathers out of the home, to bust up the nuclear family, and to make single parent households in order to basically ensure the destruction of the black male. Where's the proof of that? Because here's the thing. No one collects data like they do. We don't even, the data that we have most of the time comes from white sources. We don't collect data. They're the one that collects the data. So they're well aware, even more than we are, of how many black males and females have come out of single parent households and become successful. So if that was a strategy, is to take the black male out of the home and create the single parent scenario, if that's the strategy, it's not working. And they would know, no one would know that better than they do because they've got the statistics to prove it. They know it's not working because, again, some of the most successful people, some of the most successful black people, particularly in America, were single, came from single parent households. So, if anything, it would be the other way around. They want you to have a father in the home. If that's the case, I mean, if, in other words, if they're trying to insinuate, okay, they're letting these people be our examples in order to show us that they can make it to take us in another direction so that we won't be successful, so that we'll strive to be something that, we can't be. Well, how does that make any sense? Because obviously they can. Because they did. They did become successful in a single parent household. So then what's the downside? If you say, okay, yeah, they did, but that was a single parent household and that's not good, what's the downside? In other words, if I had been raised in a single parent household, if I didn't have my father, but I had become anywhere near as successful as Jay-Z or P. Diddy or Rick Ross, if I had even gotten close to them, which I'm obviously not, how would that have been a bad thing? How would that be a strategy that was going to destroy us? Because, if men are still impregnating, black men are still impregnating black women, you're not cutting off our survival of, furthering our race. As long as women are still having children and are still having black babies, you haven't killed that aspect of our race. And you don't even have to be married for that, obviously, because there are so many single parents. So that would have been a failure, obviously. And if some of the most famous people are coming out of single parent households, how is that hurting the black community? How? See, I can't get any logic out of that. Maybe somebody smarter than me can. I can't get any logic out of that. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. That would only make sense if you could show just the opposite. And I know they've got statistics that say, well, most of the people that end up in jail came from single parent households with more tendency to go to crime and this, that, and the third. But as I said in another video, when you're looking at statistics, a lot of times people are drawing conclusions for you that shouldn't be drawn. That if you use some critical thinking skills, it may not be as apparent as it seems. I'm still of a belief that poverty is the common denominator when it comes to crime, more so than anything is poverty. What will determine someone's actions has a lot more to do with the financial situation they're in than not. And again, I can bring that back personal to myself, and which is one of the reasons why I believe it so much. When I was, as I said before, when I first left home, I knew absolutely nothing. I was totally unprepared, and my first jobs were minimum wage jobs. And, even when you work your way up in a minimum wage job, you're not making still very much money. So, in the first, say maybe 10, 15 years of my life, I wasn't making any money at all. Well, probably less than that, close to 10 years. And so anyway, so during that time, I was a different person. And If I found somebody's wallet, I had enough of a foundation and the way I was raised that I was going to bring that wallet back to that person. But if they had money in it, you're not getting the money. I give you, you better be happy that you're getting your credit cards and your family photos back and whatever personal stuff is in there. But the money, no, I'm taking that because I wasn't going to take the chance that you may not be benevolent toward me and say, oh, thank you for giving me my wallet back. Here's a little something for you. No, I wasn't going to go down that road. I was too desperate. So if I found anybody slipping or if I found a wallet, like I said, I would go a little bit of the extra mile to give them their wallet back because I knew how important it was for people to have their family photos and credit cards and things of that nature. But no, you ain't getting the money. Well, fast forward 10 years, and then I get my career started where now I'm making enough money to live off of. And now I'm making enough money to actually have a disposable income for the first time in my life. And I run across wallets, and I'm turning the whole wallet in. I don't even look at the money because I had money in my pocket. I had no reason to, and I felt good doing it. I felt really good doing it because I do have a conscience, But I remember one day I found a wallet, and my brother, one of my brothers, came home to visit because he lives out of state, and my oldest brother, that, like I said, gave me the most of the manhood training. Me and him were more on the same level, and he understood, but my middle brother didn't. He'd never struggled in his life. He'd never struggled. He went straight from the house to college, and from college on to a really good job, great marriage. He never knew what it was to struggle financially, and he dropped his head like in shame, and it made me feel bad. And I'm like, but my oldest brother understood, so that kind of balanced it out, I guess you could say. But I still felt bad because I knew it wasn't right. I wasn't raised that way. I was raised to be honest and to do the right thing. And so but now that I had the money, I'm doing the right thing. I didn't have any more better training. All the training I had was at home. I'm a grown man now. There was no training. There wasn't another lesson to learn. I didn't join a church and get enlightened or anything like that. I just had more money. I had enough money. I had a disposable income. Money was not an issue anymore. Now I did not need someone else's money. I didn't need to take advantage of a situation where I had to choose between doing the right thing and being broke. I didn't have to make that choice. So again, father in the home has nothing to do with that as much as where are you in life, period. Now, you can say, well, if you're brought up in a situation with a single parent household where, the mother doesn't have the money and the father's not there, yeah, obviously 2 incomes are always better than 1. But again, you're still talking about a situation where it depends on the father, because there are fathers who make good money, made better money than my father did. And I would hear about those people. He'd be broke. He'd get paid on Friday, go to the club and spend it on wine, women, and song, as they used to call it, and be broke on Monday, borrowing from somebody like my father. So just because you got a father that makes money and has the potential to put a roof over your head and do everything, that means absolutely nothing. It depends on the father. It depends on what he does. Just having a father in the house, that's not automatic. That's just not automatic. That's not the way that works. And anyone that has had one of those fathers can tell you that. It's not just me talking. You know, we always hear the horror stories about, fathers raping their daughters and stepdaughters and doing real crazy stuff, but it doesn't have to be that deep. There are plenty of fathers that, have gambling problems, drinking problems, drug addiction problems. And because of that, that's where the money goes. So they're of absolutely no use whatsoever. The mother still has to struggle just as hard, like a single mother, to keep the house intact. It all falls on her shoulders because the father is basically a zero. He's there, but he's a zero. See, a lot of people don't think about that because when they don't have that father, they're glorifying in their mind what it would be like to have that father that they never had. And I understand that because you're always wonder about what life would have been like. I trust me, I did the same thing. And my father was in the house. I had both my biological parents. But I did the same thing. I used to daydream about what my life would have been like had I been in another family with other parents. I used to wish. So I totally get that. But until you're in that situation, it's just your thoughts. It's just your desires. That doesn't translate into reality. Because you still have that situation to where that variable still has to be taken in consideration. Is it going to be a father who knows how to be a father, who's functioning as a father, and who's willing to engage with you and raise you? And in this particular instance, since I'm a man, I can't speak on raising girls because I didn't even have sisters, so I can't speak on that. But knowing what it is to be a man in this world and having come up in a family where there was nothing but us boys, yeah, I know the difference of having a father who is engaged and actually trying to raise his kids. And again, if success is a barometer, because, my oldest brother, he went to jail several times. He almost went to the penitentiary. So, and he had the same upbringing we all had. He was the firstborn. And I know how his plight went. So to try and insinuate that, because the father's in the home, nobody's going to go to jail or nobody's going to get into trouble or, your grades are going to be great. No, there was only one of us that did that. And that was my middle brother. He did all the right things, but that was his personality. That's what he wanted to do. I can't even really credit my father with that. That was his desire. That's who he wanted to be. He was determined that that was going to be his life. Just like me and my other brothers were determined we were going to live the way we wanted to live. But as far as direction is concerned, like I said, we all had the same upbringing. But there's no guarantees how a child is going to grow and what they're going to get into. So again, just having a father in the house is no guarantee that they won't end up in the penitentiary. They won't end up in the penal system. That they won't end up dropping out of school. Because my brother was a dropout also. There's no guarantees about that. Just because there's a father in the home. That's the myth. And it's one that we try to grab hold to when we don't want to face reality. Because the reality is too painful. And so the other thing that happened to me, other than my brother helping to raise me into being a man, another person that was very instrumental in my life was a friend of my brother's who was older than my brother, much older. And he was around my brother because at the time my brother was into race cars. They were trying to uh, be professional. He he got my brother to stop racing on the street, start racing on the track. They got a car together, and he got him connections to where he could get a car hauler and a lot of equipment and things of that nature. Because a lot of money goes into racing professionally, and so he was this big guy. He was huge. He was every bit about 6'6", and he was like muscle from head to toe. I mean, he wasn't, gym muscle bound, prison muscle bound, but he was still, like a big country boy. He wasn't nobody to play with. And so at the time, I happened to be over. He was over at my brother's house. I was there, and he called me down, and we were in the kitchen, and he started in on me because at that particular time I was at the lowest point in my life. I was at the lowest. I've never been that low, and I was a sad case. I really was. I mean, looking back, it's I was pathetic at that particular point in time because, like I said, I left home. I had not a clue, and I was basically really wasn't making it. And he just tore me down. I mean, he talked about me. He just shamed me. He said, "Look at you." He said, I think at the time I might have been about 22, and he said, "Look at you." He said, "You ought to be doing this. You ought to be doing that. This is the time of your life when you're supposed to be doing this and that and the third. Look at you." And I really didn't need that. I'm like, I'm already feeling low enough to walk up under a door with high heel shoes on. I didn't need more pile on. And he was just, but at the same time, as mad as I was, he was too big to whoop. So I kind of had to take it. And, but then when he got done, he told me, he said, "Now I understand, I know," because I was, at that particular time, I was really into acoustics, sound systems, and things of that nature. I used to hook up stuff. Uh, I used to love that kind of stuff. This was before the boom boxes and all the kind of stuff that's out now. Back then, we made our own stuff. I used to wire my tweeters and my woofers together, and we used to make enclosures for them and things like that. And he said, I know you're pretty good with that kind of stuff." He said, and he happened to be a weekend DJ. He had a regular job, but he was a weekend DJ. And he says, "I'm going to hire you to hook up my equipment." He said, "I'm going to pay you." He said, "I usually work like Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays." I'm booked up for a whole year." He said, "So I'll be working every weekend." And he said, I'm going to hire you to work for me if you want to do it." And at the time, I was unemployed. I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll do it. I mean, what else did I have to do?" And so I started doing that until I was able to get a full-time job and then went on from there. But the bottom line is that was the first time in my life I ever had anybody do more than criticize me. See, my family had always put me down. My father in particular, he always put me down. He never said anything positive. If I heard anything positive at all, it came from my mother. I never heard anything positive come from my father. It was so bad that, if I thought he wouldn't have backhanded me, I would ask him, "Why in the hell did you even have me in the first place? If you feel this way about me, I'm only here because of you. And, what do you expect me to do about it now? Roll over and die? Just so you'll feel better?" I mean, what? It was that bad. And no one had ever talked to me the way he did, this guy did, and then turn around and offer me a hand up. No one had ever done that before. Because when he got done, he offered me a job. And I'll never forget that. That was very instrumental in turning my life around because Anybody can say something positive to you and it can just sound like some nice words. But when you put some actions behind it and you put trust behind it, now it means something. See, when he trusted me to work with him and to help put his stuff together, I knew he wasn't just talking. Because I've had people talk real good and crazy to me and then turn around and, kind of sweet talk me a little bit later because they didn't want me to still be pissed at them. But this wasn't that. He actually put his money where his mouth was. And I never forgot that. And that was very instrumental in me getting myself together as a man. Because once I had one person believing in me, I knew I could get other people to believe me too. I believed the hype. I believed what he said that he saw in me that I did not see in myself. Something that my father never did. And so I'm just saying this for anybody, any males, any black males, and not necessarily black males, but in particularly black males, because this, like I said, this whole myth about the black family being together and that being such a big deal, I'm going to let you know that that's just not the case. That statement has to be qualified. Yes, it's true. If you have a good father in the home who is engaged with the kids and helping to actually raise those kids in a healthy way, yes, I believe that definitely makes a difference. But it doesn't mean that if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful as a man. There are other ways out. You just simply have to seek them. You just simply have to insist on you're going to be a man anyway. And you're going to learn what it takes to be a man regardless. And you can do that. I did it. And I'm not special. But you have to be receptive. And you can't take a woe is me attitude toward it. Again, that plaque that I saw at work, that was a lifesaver. A lifesaver. Because, again, no one had ever told me that. That when you're a man, you handle things. And when you're not, you get handled. That told me all I needed to know. No one had to say anything to me after that. That was it. I'm like, now I got it. I'm through looking for anyone to ever think that I'm ever going to have any sob story that I'm going to tell anybody as a man that's going to make a difference. The only thing that matters is how I handle whatever happens to me in life. Good or bad. How do I handle it? Because how I handle it as a man is going to be the way I'm going to be seen by others as a man. I hope this reaches someone that needed to hear it. It's something that has really been on my mind, really, really heavy. And I hope it helps somebody. Anyway, again, if you could hit the like button for me, and if you could leave a comment, I'd really appreciate it. Bye until the next time.